Is learning French really that hard for an English native speaker, and why might it be? In this video, I'm going to share with you why French learning might or might not be a challenge for an English native speaker and what to do about it. Hi, I'm Fanny. I'm a French teacher with a decade of experience teaching. I'm also a linguist. I studied translation at university, and today I'm going to share my experience teaching to English native speakers, specifically teaching French. There is a common perception that French is harder to learn than any other European language. It is even considered harder to learn than Spanish. That is something that I've experienced as a French girl and a French teacher. A lot of people, French people included, believe that French is a difficult language. There are various reasons why one would think that, and you might have some ideas. With many of those reasons, I can definitely agree. However, contrary to popular belief, the French language is one of the easiest and the most useful language to learn for an English native speaker. See this table made by the Foreign Service Institute, ranking most spoken languages and how easy or difficult it would be for an English native speaker to reach professional working proficiency. This table was created based on their experience teaching a wide range of languages to thousands of students during a period of 70 years. As you can see, French is one of the easiest languages to learn because it's so closely related to English. So if you thought of learning or if you started learning French, stay with me. I don't have 70 years of experience, but I've made some empirical research on my students, my relatives, my friends, and this video is a list of the potential challenges that would face an English native speaker when learning French that would prevent some people to even try learning French, or that would get in the way of beginners who want to reach a certain level of fluency. So why is French considered so difficult to learn? So the first reason would be French has been historically regarded as the language of high European culture. That led to the faulty assumption that French is more difficult and more complex as a language than any other European language. The second reason, as you might know if you've already tried to learn a little bit of French, is that written French and spoken French are quite different. The spelling system requires a little bit of time to learn, but it has real advantages for English native speakers to learn the French spelling, as English borrows a lot of words from the French language. Think about cuisine, restaurant, ballet, haute couture, déjà vu.
What I was trying to say here is that it can be very useful for an English native speaker to learn the French spelling system, because a lot of words in English are borrowed from the French language because of the invasion of England by the Normans in the 11th century. Basically, learning the French spelling can help with English spelling.
Another reason given in this study that I've just mentioned is that people are more successful learning a second language when they live in a country where learning a second language is expected and necessary. Think about African countries, Belgium, Canada, where bilingualism is a thing. If you are from the UK or the US or Australia, for example, your language, so English, is already the language that you need to do anything. But for an Italian native speaker or a German native speaker, learning a second language, English, will be very rewarding and will open up a world of possibilities. Just think about the internet. Everything is in English. A lot of things are in English. So for those people, it's expected and necessary to have a second language. That is why you really need internal motivation as an English native speaker to learn a second language, because it might not be a matter of getting more work opportunities or understanding the internet. One of those motivations might be that French is allegedly difficult to learn, and that's why you should study it. So what are the potential challenges for English native speakers specifically when it comes to learning French? This part is going to give you some ideas on where to start. What should you learn first? One of the first challenges that I can think of is pronunciation. French has a number of sounds that obviously don't exist in English. Think about the r, the r, the u, the nasal sounds like on, un, if you're from the south of France. Pronunciation challenges are not unique to French, but speaking about French language, this is what's going to make it hard for an English native speaker to discriminate between tu and tout, pur and pour, for example, ton and ton.
I want to add that the context is obviously going to make it easier to understand and discriminate between those words that I've just mentioned.
One thing that is part of those pronunciation challenges is what we call the liaison. It's the connection, the spoken connections between words that we make when we speak. Between an article and a noun, between an adjective and a noun, between a pronoun and a verb. I'm gonna put some here. Take un petit enfant. The T is usually silent, but because there is a E in enfant, you would have to connect the adjective and the noun orally. You would have to learn those rules because they are also optional connections. Many French learners tell me that French just sounds like one big word, and that is because of those liaisons. So you might want to give it a look. So what to do about it? You study the liaison. How do you actually actively work on it? First thing I would say, study vocabulary in groups of words. Don't just learn enfant. Try to learn les petits enfants or un petit enfant, not just isolated words. The second thing I would recommend, and I've mentioned that in another video that I made before, is watch French content or listen to French content, whether it's a podcast, a video, a film, with the French subtitles. In that way, your brain is going to make a connection between the written words and how they are spoken. And this is very, very useful. In that way, your brain is going to associate written French and spoken French, and you'll be able to see where the words split and which connections are made. Another challenge is spelling problems. As I said, French spelling and pronunciation differ greatly. Look at the word s'il vous plaît and how it's spelled. It's going to make it harder to remember that s'il vous plaît is actually spelled like that. There are so many silent letters and the transcription of the sound is a little bit tricky. However, it is not fair to say that it's particularly difficult when French spelling is actually consistent compared to English spelling. Take the grapheme E, A, I. It will always make the sound E. If you spell O-N, it will always make the sound on. E-A-U is always going to make the sound O. Whereas in English, this grapheme sometimes going to be pronounced A, like steak, and sometimes it's going to be pronounced like a long E, ear, for example. I'm not here to defend the French language. There are over 300 million people speaking that language already, whether it's their first or second language. And if you want to be one of them, keep watching. Another challenge, silent letters. You know what was coming with those. Silent letters, you have those that express the gender of the word, like the final E for feminine words. The ones that give you the number, final S, final X for the plural. The person of the verb, sometimes it's an S, sometimes it's a T, an X, E and T. They're all silent until they're not. That is confusing. That is something every French learner should be aware of, and I would consider starting with that actually. Once you know the rules, which letters are silent, when are they not silent, it's easier to go forward. And that's just going to be a problem of the past. Other difficulty is stress and rhythm of speech. There's almost no stress syllable in French. For English native speakers can be a bit confusing because a lot of words and syllables are stressed in English. Take the word university. University. In French it's just université. It's super flat. Some people would argue that the last syllable is always a bit higher and a little bit more stressed in French. I can't see that it's the case. It also depends on the accent of the French speaker. One difficulty that I have seen amongst my students, and that I have to say is not just with English native speakers, is the contractions. There are some mandatory contractions. Take the word s'il vous plaît. It would be actually si il vous plaît, which means if it pleases you. But we can't say that. We have to contract the si and the il because of the two I's next to one another. So it would be s'il vous plaît. Other contractions that are not mandatory. Tu as, ta is a possibility. Tu as faim, ta faim.
What could be confusing is that some contractions are mandatory and some are not.
Another challenge that is not unique to French because German also has it, Spanish, Italian and other languages have it, is the gender. Like nouns have a gender. Is this female? How about this? How do I know? Well, good news is sometimes you can, depending on the ending. The words with et, the words with ur, sion are always feminine, whereas the words with war, al, o would always be masculine. For the rest, I guess it's just a matter of memorization. But the good news is it's not important. This is not something you should spend a lot of time on. If you say un stylo instead of un stylo, French people are actually going to understand you and they might correct you, they might not. Your message is still gonna go through. My solution as a teacher, although if you really want to remember the gender, and that's what I use as a German learner because Germans have 3 genders. I would suggest to learn once again the nouns in a group. If you learn fleur, it's not going to give you a lot of hints whether it's feminine or masculine. It's feminine. But if you learn une fleur blanche with an adjective, with an article, you're more likely to remember that fleur is actually feminine. So another problem that I encounter English native speakers, talking about my students or people around me, when they learn French is false friends. To rest is not rester. To attend is not attendre. Actually, rester is to stay, attendre is to wait. The good news is there are thousands of lists on the internet about false friends between English and French. The most common, I would start with that. We keep going. Another difficulty, I would say, for learners that are a little bit more advanced would be verbs and which preposition they use after. I often hear students say chercher pour, to search for, to look for something. That doesn't work. Chercher doesn't need any preposition after. To ask somebody is always demander à. I would always learn a verb with the preposition or not that they use. We can say parler à quelqu'un, to talk to somebody, parler de, to speak about something, parler avec, to speak with. I would suggest learn those verbs with their preposition. It's going to make it a lot more easy when you're going to work on indirect and direct objects. Those prepositions are really hard to memorize just because prepositions don't carry any meaning usually. Now we're going into a little bit more depth with the grammar. I've listed the problems in order of difficulty. The last 2 challenges I'm going to talk about are conjugation problem. One challenge that was mentioned in the study that I talked about is the problem with the use of past tenses. We have 2 main tenses in French, imparfait, passé composé, where English expresses the imperfect tense, so to talk about habits in past, description, background action, in different ways with used to, would, was, and the verb ending in ing, I was doing, I used to do, I did, I would do. French uses verbal endings with AIS, AIT, AIENT, je mangeais, je faisais, je disais. As the imperfect is a matter of the whole sentence in English, it can take more time to acquire the concept and when to use it in French. The global difficulty with French conjugation is there are a lot of forms to learn. There are a lot of tenses, but I would argue that Spanish has, for example, more subjunctives. Italian as well. In French, we only have 2 subjunctive tenses, the present and the past, where I believe that Spanish has 4, Italian definitely has 4. Let me know if you studied Spanish, because so I guess that's 2 less tenses to memorize. Another good news is that those irregular verbs that have so many different forms, present, in the past, in the future, être, avoir, aller, faire, dire, they are the most used verbs, the most commonly used verbs. So memorizing their form is usually a quick process. Another tense that you don't need to remember in French is the simple past, le passé simple. I know that in Spanish it's a thing. In Italian, it can be a thing depending on the regions. The good news is that spoken French does not use the simple past, so I guess that's 1 less tense to memorize. And finally, this is the last challenge for English native speakers. I know we've covered a lot of challenges. These are the most common problems that my students encounter. Last challenge though is the problem associated with the lack of French content. It is evident that content exists largely in English. Think about movies, music, videos on YouTube, books, podcasts, the internet, and obviously less in other languages. But French is actually the first language of 28 countries, therefore over 28 cultures, which makes it more likely to find content in French than Italian or German, for example. Also, fun fact, but France is the 3rd country to produce the most films after the US and the UK, and the 5th country to produce the most music. So I guess there's a lot of French content out there. I guess it's always going to be less than English content, but you can still find at least a couple of movies, a couple of songs, a couple of YouTube videos to watch. I'm going to link below. I have have made a Spotify playlist with over 10 hours of French music. It's only French songs from different decades, different genres, and usually my students really like them. That's all I've got for you today. Of course, that's not an exhaustive list of challenges that face English native speakers when it comes to learning French, but I think it gives you a good idea on where to start, what to study first. And if you are learning French, please leave me a comment, tell me what challenges you've faced or what challenges you are currently facing. If you're thinking about learning French, there you go, you know where to start, what to study first. Thank you for watching this video, and I will see you again very soon. Subscribe if you're not subscribed yet, because I'm going to post other videos like these. If you like hearing about languages, language learning and French learning, I will post a lot more videos on that topic. Bye!